If I'm going to say I believe in Jesus, I have to believe it 100%. I did not grow up going to church like most people. I thought Christians were nuts. I didn't know what was going on, but God was working on me. Just out of nowhere, he said, you know what, Dylan? God's telling me to talk to you about Jesus. He bursts through the windshield. He's laying on the ground and he can't move. And the doctor comes in and says, Mr. Taft, I'm not a religious man, but there is no medical explanation for you to be alive right now. We fear what we don't understand. And I said, God, I don't know who you are and I don't know what you are, but I know you're there.
Dylan, I never talk about religion on this channel, but your story gave me goosebumps last night at a restaurant, and I wanted you to share it. And I really want to talk about business and religion. I think there's a place when we talk about our religion in our work space, but not many people understand when to say that you're a Christian or you're a religious person and when to shut up and not to mention it. First, I want to start with your story. How did you become a believer? Like, what's your journey?
Yeah, so thanks. I love that we're talking about this. I did not grow up going to church like most people. And by the time I got to high school, I don't know, you just start to develop your own views. And I thought Christians were nuts. I mean, why would you devote your life to some book written by men and claim that you know the truth and everybody else is misguided? I just thought it was so arrogant, right? But God works in funny ways. And back in those days, I used to be really in good shape and worked out all the time, and met a guy at the gym and started running into this guy all the time. It's just weird. Like, I just keep running into this guy, Roy. And he was real friendly and we became friends, and he invited me to hang out with some of his friends. And then he started just inviting me to have tea at this place called Cafe Brazil in Houston. And I didn't know what was going on, but God was working on me. Now, for some reason, I was really passionate about meeting Christians and trying to get them to leave the faith. I mean, I would just bombard them with questions like, why do you believe in God? Why do you believe the Bible? Why this? Why that? Well, God did 3 big things in my life to completely shift my perspective from being a really passionate skeptic to being a passionate believer. So the first thing was meeting Roy. So for 2 years, we met over tea at Cafe Brazil, drinking Egyptian licorice tea. It tasted so good. And just hurling all of my unbelief at him. And he had really good answers for every question I would ask. And after about 2 years, I realized he had a lot of good answers and all I had was questions. And so at the end of 2 years, I said, Roy, there's something really special about you. I don't know what it is, but I know I don't have it. And I really like it. And I know none of my family members or friends have it either. And I know it's all connected to Christianity and Jesus somehow. So I want a really good book. I want the best book you can give me on Christianity, and I want really good reasons for what Christianity is not. I don't just want to be told what it is. And he said, okay, I have a really good book for people like you who are real skeptical and like to pick ideas apart. And he said, it's called Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. It's the same guy that wrote the Chronicles of Narnia series. I said, okay, I'd love to read it. Next day, he comes to my house with the book. And in my arrogance, I'd read enough philosophy just to be dangerous. I wasn't like a philosophy major in college or anything, but I thought I knew plenty. And I thought, I'm gonna rip this book to shreds. I'm gonna just expose all the holes in this Christian worldview. And the exact opposite happened. Every page I read, I was like, wow, this makes perfect sense. Next page, yeah, I agree with that too. And for me, I naturally pick things apart. So for me to agree with everything I read is really wild. So that's the second big thing God did, was give me that book. The third thing God did was he sent a complete stranger to my house to tell me about Jesus. And it was the middle of the summertime in Texas. It was blazing hot outside, and we had a lawn service come and do our yard because I had knee surgery and I couldn't walk. I couldn't push a lawnmower. So this guy, I show him the front yard, we go to the back, I show him the backyard, and this guy's like in the best mood of his life. I'm thinking, why is this guy so happy and he's smiling? It's like 105 degrees outside in Houston. And he's just weird. He was so like full of joy, it was weird to me. And I'm about to walk in the house and he said, you know what, Dylan, just out of nowhere. He said, you know what, Dylan? God's telling me to talk to you about Jesus. And the guy that I was, I hung out with kind of a rougher group of people, and the normal me would have said, man, get the, you know what, out of my yard. I don't want to listen to anything you have to say. But something told me to stand there and listen. And I listened. And he said, Dylan, do you have any idea how much God loves you? Do you have any clue about that? And I'm just like, no, I don't know. He said, man, God has all the hairs on your head numbered. He knows your name. He knew your name. Yeah, it was there. I still shaved my head back then, but it was thicker. But he said, God knows all, he knew your name before you were even born. He knew we were going to have this conversation. He planned it. And he just started like basically preaching to me in my backyard. I mean, he's like pacing back and forth in my yard, smiling the whole time. It was the wildest experience. But everything he was saying was just hitting me in a way that's really hard to explain. And by the end of it, he's like throwing his arm around my shoulder saying, come on, man, you can pray right now to accept Jesus. You can do that. And I said, look, you are really passionate about this. If I'm going to say I believe in Jesus, I have to believe it 100%. I can't do this halfway. And he said, okay, well, you go inside and you pray. You ask God to show you the truth. And I said, oh, okay, fine, I'll go pray. I'd prayed maybe 3 or 4 times in my whole life, because why would you pray to a God that you don't even know is right? So I went inside and I just prayed and I said, God, I don't know who you are and I don't know what you are, but I know you're there. C.S. Lewis has convinced me of that. But there's all these different ideas about you, and they can't all be true. C.S. Lewis has convinced me of that too. 2 + 2 is 4. It's not 3 and it's not 5. It's not up for debate. So whatever the idea of you is true. You're there. So people can have an idea about you that's false, but it doesn't change the truth. So I say, God, please show me the truth. I want to believe it. If it's true, all that stuff I just heard sounds amazing if it's true, but I do not want to be deceived. I don't want to believe a lie. So please show me the truth. Well, that's when God did the 4th and final thing. And I got a call out of the blue by a buddy from junior high. And he said, hey, Dylan, how's it going? And I thought, man, Chris, it's going great. I haven't talked to you in forever. How are you? And he said, well, I'm getting married. And then I'm thinking, oh man, that's kind of lame, because I'm a total unbeliever. I don't know anything about what marriage is about. And he said, well, I said, I hope I can make it. And he said, well, I hope so too. I want you to be the best man in the wedding. I thought, wow. Well, looking back, that was God's way of making sure I showed up that day. Because God had a pivotal experience for me. And I showed up, the couple gets married, we go to the wedding reception. I'm meeting all these different people I've never met before. And it's like standing room only in this reception hall. And I meet this old man, he's probably 80 years old. And we get to talking, and he was holding a picture frame in his hand, and it looked like he had some coin collection or something. And so I said, well, what is this? And he said, well, young man, this is one of the happiest days of my life. I'm the grandfather of the bride, and I'm so happy for Chris and Kelly. And he said, this is their wedding gift. And I said, well, what is it? And he said, well, it represents the most important thing in life. And I'm thinking, well, I'm a pretty philosophical guy. What is the most important thing in life? And he said, the 1 gold coin on top represents Jesus Christ, and the 12 gold coins underneath represent his 12 disciples. And I said, oh, that's interesting. I'm reading a book about Christianity right now. And he said, you know what, young man? God is telling me to talk to you about Jesus. And I'm thinking, wait a second. A guy in my backyard said the exact same thing like 2 weeks ago. What's going on here? Because I'm thinking, there's no way, they don't know each other. And there's not preachers at churches telling people to just randomly tell people that, right? So I said, okay. And he said, young man, I know that I need to share with you what happened to me. And he said, the only people that know this are my direct family and a few of my closest friends. But I know I need to share with you what happened to me, because you won't believe in Jesus unless I share this story with you. And so I'm thinking, wow, what is this guy about to tell me? So he told me that he always believed in Jesus as long as he could remember. He became a believer when he was 5 or 6 years old as a little boy, and walked with the Lord, from then on. But about 30 years ago, and he told me this story 20 years ago, so about 50 years ago, he's driving down an old Texas road out in the middle of nowhere to deliver some business papers to a really important customer. And this is before fax machines and cell phones and all that, so a lot of stuff was delivered by hand. So he's driving down this road. He's been driving for hours and hours, and it's hot, so he's got the window down, and wind is whipping into the car, and it starts blowing these papers out of his briefcase, or out of his business bag, whatever he's got. And he takes his eyes off the road to put his hand on these papers, and he doesn't realize it, but the road is curving on this hill that he's on. And he starts to feel the steering wheel shaking, and he looks back and he's losing control of the car. And he did everything he could to get control of the car, but he completely lost control. The car goes flying off the hill, down to the bottom of the hill, smashes into the ground. He bursts through the windshield. He's laying on the ground and he can't move. And he's starting to think, oh my God, I broke my back. But then he realized he could move his shoulders, but he couldn't feel any pain and he couldn't move anything else. So he starts like inching his way along the ground, and he's thinking he can make it all the way to the top of the hill and hopefully someone will see him. But he's out in the middle of nowhere and he himself hasn't seen a car in hours. Well, he moves a few inches along the ground and he just passes out. Well, while he's laying there, a man and his little boy just happen to be driving down that same old Texas road out in the middle of nowhere in a brand new car. And they start approaching the same hill and the car starts to overheat. And they start driving up the hill and steam starts to come out of the hood of the car. And they get to the top of the hill and the car breaks down. So the guy gets out of his car. He's trying to figure out what went wrong. He's jacking with all the engine. There's nothing wrong with the car. He goes to restart it again. Now the battery's completely dead. The car is just dead. Well, his little boy's like looking around and exploring a little bit. You know, they've been there for like an hour. And the little boy comes up and he says, Dad, there's somebody at the bottom of the hill. There's something down there. And they look down there and they run down the bottom of the hill and there's this crushed up car with a body laying next to it, motionless. So they decide to drag him back up to the top of the hill. His name is Lawrence Taft. They drag Mr. Taft to the top of the hill and they hope that maybe in the next few hours, a car will come by. Well, they're just sitting there and the little boy goes, Dad, try to start the car one more time. And this man's thinking, okay, son, you know, the car's dead. Don't know why, but it's not gonna start. So he sits in the car, puts the key in the ignition, turns the key, the car starts right up. Like there was nothing ever wrong with it. It's not overheating, it's a perfectly running car. So they put Mr. Taft in the car and they rush him to the nearest doctor's office. They get him in there, put him on the table in the medical room, and the doctor comes in and he wakes up. Lawrence Taft wakes up, and the doctor comes in and says, Mr. Taft, I'm not a religious man, but there is no medical explanation for you to be alive right now. You should have lost so much blood. You should have, like all these things, it makes no sense that you're alive. And I'm thinking, I'm hearing this at this wedding reception. I'm thinking, wow, God worked a miracle in your life. That's really cool. And he looks at me and he says, young man, when I was laying next to that car, I didn't pass out. I died. And he said, when I died, I rose about 20 feet above my body. And I was looking down at my body and he said, I wasn't happy, I wasn't sad. He's like, I looked at it kind of like a used garment. It had served its purpose and now it was done. And he said, then I started to think, where am I? Am I dead? Am I alive? What's happening? And as soon as he could think the question, the answer would come. And so he started to think more questions or just have thoughts. Almost before he could finish the thought, the answer would come. And he said he started to be filled with all this understanding, so he had no fear, because we fear what we don't understand. But he was in this weird experience where it was perfect understanding. Then everything around him turned totally dark. In the middle of a bright sunny day, it just went totally dark all around him. And he began to be lifted away from his body up to this bright white light way, way up above. And he started to be lifted faster and faster and faster, and still the whole question and answer thing. And eventually he was lifted like out into outer space. I mean, he's just out in darkness and he's set down and the light is way off in the distance and he can walk toward it. And he's walking toward the light and he noticed off in the distance was this beautiful white gate, like this massive gate. And he said immediately when you saw this gate, you knew that no human architect could ever design something like this. It was so beautiful and huge and amazing. And there were all these people standing outside the gate in front of it, and they knew him and they were yelling his name. And they were like, Lawrence, Lawrence, we're here, we're here. And some of them were family members that had been dead for generations. And he wanted to run to them. He said the joy he felt was like the most amazing family reunion you could ever imagine, the amount of joy he felt. He just wanted to be with them forever. But something spoke to him and said, not yet, Lawrence, walk to the light. So he keeps walking to the light, and the light gets brighter and brighter and brighter. And he said it got so bright, like it was brighter than the sun, and he had to shield his eyes from it while he walked toward it. Then he began to feel something coming off of the light, and it became more and more intense, and it became so overwhelming that it drowned everything else out. The desire to go to the people at the gate, the whole question and answer understanding experience. He said he became completely consumed by what he felt coming off of the light. And he said, young man, do you know what I felt coming off of that light? And I was just like, no, what did you feel? And he said, what I felt was love. And he said, I felt a love so tremendous that you can't even comprehend how amazing it is here on earth. Your own mother or father or family members can't love you that much. You can't love anyone like in this way. He said it was so wonderful, I could barely handle it. It almost brought me to my knees. And he said the light started to dim, and he realized a man was walking toward him, and the light was coming from the man's face, but he couldn't make out his appearance at all. And all of this love coming from this man, and the light dimmed even more, and he said the man walking toward him was Jesus Christ. And he said Jesus came up to him, and he said he knew two things right away. He said, I knew I was finally home, and I was finally in the presence of my Savior. And he said Jesus came up to him, and he took both of his hands, and all he could feel was love. And he said, Jesus said, Lawrence, it's not yet your time. There's still many things I have for you to do. And boom, he was back in his body in the hospital or the doctor's office. And that's when the doctor came in and said, Mr. Taft, I'm not a religious man, but there's no medical explanation for you to be alive right now. So needless to say, when he shared that with me, I was like stunned. I mean, I'd never heard a story like that in my life. You know, I became kind of stupefied the rest of the night. I couldn't have a conversation with anybody. All I could think about was what I just heard. And I thought about it every day for about 2 weeks. And one day I was outside, I was just kind of looking up at the sky, thinking about all this stuff. And I thought, wait a second. I meet this guy at the gym that had something so special about him, and it was all connected to his relationship with God and Jesus. Then I read this book about Christianity that doesn't just make good sense, it seems to make perfect sense. Then I meet a total stranger in my backyard that says, God is telling me to talk to you about Jesus. And everything he said just seemed to have the ring of truth somehow. Then I meet this total stranger at a wedding reception that says, God is telling me to talk to you about Jesus. And he shares this near-death experience that he had where he met Jesus, who is God. And I thought, oh my God, I know you now. You have revealed yourself to me, and you love me, and this is the truth. And I mean, I wept tears of joy. I was so overwhelmed by the fact that I actually knew God and he'd revealed himself to me. And then I just started sharing it with everybody, like totally just over the top. I mean, you talk about guys in roofing that knock doors and don't care. Like I was telling everybody about Jesus. I needed a lot of discipling and mentoring, and I got that, thankfully. But yeah, that's why I'm a believer, and it really drives everything we do in business.
Love it. The reason I wanted to share this story, first of all, Sunday, we have war going on right now with Ukraine, and we have so many negative views, and I mean, I want to bring positive content this week, so enjoy your Sunday. Comment below if you guys like this story, and I try for a reason not to mix religion and business. I rarely talk about anything, but last night we were having dinner with Dylan, and I heard the story. I'm like, my audience needs to hear this. This is the coolest story ever. I've heard similar stories, like when people die and go, and whether you believe or don't believe, like I'm not trying to preach to you, it's your decision. I wanted to share the story, like everybody makes decision whether to believe or not believe, or maybe you have your explanation. And I want to hear from you. Maybe comment below your walk with God, or maybe you're atheist. I'm not going to offend us. Like people comment all the time, like, oh, don't bring religion, or God does not exist. I just did a post the other day, said God is still in control about the war, and people like, no, he is not, because people are suffering. God could not do it. And it's all fun, it's fine. It's your, I think God is love. I think we should fear him, but fear, it's not like, oh, he's going to kill me. Like that's not, people don't understand the fear, the biblical fear. Anyway, after I heard the story, I'm like, I gotta ask this guy to share it on camera, and we're gonna publish it Sunday. Hope you guys enjoyed. Give it a like if you did. I'll see you in the next video.